This is an HTML5 course for beginners, and it is the first step if you want to become a software developer. In this course, we will start from scratch. I'll cover what HTML is, its basic structure, and how to create your first web page. We'll also explore how to add images, create links, tables, lists, forms, embed other web pages, and all that good stuff. I'm Dima. I've been working as a software developer for 12 years. My goal for this course is to cover the HTML topics that I frequently use at work and find practical. The good news is it's not that many topics and they're relatively simple. I made the videos as short as possible to cover the essentials you'll use. And don't worry if you have no HTML or technical skills. So let's get started. HTML is not programming. It's more like formatting. It's like the body of all websites, providing structure and content. Now, you might have heard about CSS and JavaScript. CSS makes websites look good. JavaScript, on the other hand, adds interactivity. There is also PHP and other backend programming languages, which handle the website's behind-the-scenes actions, like processing forms. In this video, I'll focus only on HTML. We won't dive into CSS, JavaScript, or PHP just yet. This way, you can concentrate on building a strong foundation. To follow along, you'll need two main tools, a web browser and a code editor. The browser displays your HTML web pages, and the code editor is where you'll write your HTML code. Any modern browser will do, but I recommend Google Chrome. For the code editor, Visual Studio Code or VS Code is a great option. It's free, powerful, and designed to make coding easier. Both Chrome and VS Code are free. I'll provide links to them in the description. But if you want, you can choose other browsers or code editors. The key is to have a setup that lets you write code and see your work in action. With our tools ready, it's time to create our first project. On your computer, create a new folder wherever it's convenient for you. I'll create mine on the desktop. This folder will hold all the files for our website. Name it something you'll remember, like my website. Now open VS Code or any other code editor of your choice and open your newly created folder. It's File, Open Folder. Now create a new file and name it index.html. The index.html file is the default file that browsers look for when accessing a website directory. It's the main entrance to your website, like the front door to your house. You can have many HTML files in your folder, but it's best to always have one named index.html. Inside index.html, type "when aliens invade," comma, space, less than, strong, greater than, only pizza, less than slash strong, greater than, can save us. This is an HTML tag. Think of a tag as a label for your content. In HTML, tags usually come in pairs: an opening tag and a closing tag. Tags are enclosed in angle brackets, and a closing tag has also a slash. An opening tag, content, and a closing tag together create an HTML element. In our example, the strong tag makes this text important or bold. It's used to emphasize text. It's like highlighting a word in a book with a bold marker. That's what strong does in HTML. This simple code is our first HTML document. Let's open it in the browser. There are multiple ways to do that. Let's use the simplest one. Click the right mouse button on the file in the sidebar in VS Code. Select Reveal in Finder for Mac or Reveal in File Explorer for Windows. Then click the right mouse button on the file, select Open with Chrome. And there it is, your first web page. Let me place the browser and VS Code side by side for more convenience. So, this is an opening strong tag. This is a closing strong tag. Together with the content in between, they create a strong HTML element. Let's say we want only pizza can save us to be on a separate line. For that, I'll add one more HTML element. I'll write BR here. The BR tag is a break, like hitting enter on your keyboard. It starts a new line. Oh, look at this, on a new line. Unlike the strong element, BR doesn't need a closing tag because it doesn't wrap around content. So, the strong tag bolts the text and BR moves some text to a new line. Congratulations, you've got your first HTML page. Now let's structure this page properly. Every HTML page follows a certain structure, like a blueprint. A well-structured HTML page helps web browsers render your page correctly and makes your code more readable. Let's remove this for now. Okay, every proper HTML page should start with a doc type. It goes on the first line. I'll write doc type space HTML. The doc type is not an HTML tag. It's an instruction that tells the browser which version of HTML we'll use for this page. It's like we're telling the browser the language we're speaking. Without it, the browser might misunderstand our page's content. This doc type is for HTML5. We use it because it's the newest and most frequently used HTML version at this moment. Next comes the HTML tag. Notice that VS Code puts the closing tag automatically. The HTML element is the root element that contains every other element in our page. It's like saying everything from here to here is my website. It's a good practice to add an attribute called lang to our opening HTML tag. This way, we specify the primary language of our page's content. For English, it's going to be N. Attributes are special words to customize or configure any HTML element. We always put attributes in the opening tag. Attributes are key value pairs where the key is the name of an attribute and the value, well, it's the actual value we put to configure this HTML element. Like in our case, we say that it's English. The syntax for adding an attribute is straightforward. You start with the attribute name, followed by an equals sign, and then the attribute value is in quotes. Quotes help the browser correctly interpret the attribute's value, especially when the value includes spaces. You can have many attributes in one HTML tag, and their order doesn't matter. Okay. Inside HTML, first comes the head element. Our web page visitors cannot see it. This element and its contents are for the browser and search engines. It has information about your website, like the page title, character set, and links to CSS or JavaScript files, and many more. Think of the head element as your page's brain that stores all the essential behind-the-scenes information. One of the things you normally do inside the head element is set the title of the page. I'll add an opening title tag, and VS Code autocompletes it with the closing tag. The content of our title is going to be aliens and pizza. This is what appears in the browser's title bar or tab. There you go. There is our title. The title is crucial for both users and search engines like Google to know what our page is about. The head tag isn't just for the title. It's a container for all your meta information, including links to style sheets and scripts, meta tags for SEO, and more. Those are a bit more advanced concepts, which I'll cover in later videos. Finally, we have the body element. This is where all the visible parts of your website will be. Text, images, videos that you want to show, place them here. If the head element is the brain, the body element is, well, the body of your web page. It displays all the content that users interact with. At this stage, if I refresh the page, it's empty. That's because we haven't put anything in the body. We've only prepared a proper page structure. Let me put our content back right inside the body element. Don't forget to save the file in VS Code. Great, it's back. Looks the same, right? But now our web page is structured correctly according to HTML5 standards. So, a proper HTML5 page has the doc type declaration where you specify the HTML version of your page. Use this for HTML5. Then you wrap all your HTML with the HTML element. It's the root element of your web page. Don't forget to set the language of your page with the lang attribute. Then you add the head and the body elements. The head contains your web page's metadata, like the title. The body stores the visible content of your page. This HTML5 page structure is a good foundation for your web pages to work well across different browsers and devices. Alright, I'll remove this. Let's add something super important to our web page. I'm talking about a link. In HTML, we use the A tag for that. It stands for anchor, and that's what we use to create links. You can have a link to another web page, a file, an email address, or even a specific part of the same page. This is the tag behind every click here or learn more that you've ever encountered online. Let's add a link to Google. To specify the actual link, we use the href attribute, which stands for hypertext reference. This is where we put the URL or the web address we want to link to. So if I want to have a link to Google, I'll write this. Remember to wrap your attribute value with quotes. VS Code adds the closing tag automatically, and a couple of seconds is saved. Our links text will be just Google it. This text becomes clickable and will take us to Google when clicked. There you go, there is our link. Links by default look a bit different than other text. If I click the link, we go over to the Google's web page in our current browser tab. Now let's add something cool. We can make our link open in a new tab using the target attribute. I'll add target _blank. Let me go back to our web page first and refresh it. Now if I click the link, a new tab opens. This is useful for external links. It keeps our web page open in the browser so visitors can easily return. Another useful attribute is title. Let's put "You might Google about aliens and pizza" there too. Now when I hover over the link, we have this little tooltip. And this is how you add links to your web page. I'll remove our link. Next, we'll discuss several tags that will help you structure your web page content more effectively: paragraphs, headings, and thematic breaks. First up is the P tag. The P tag defines a paragraph in HTML. Think of it as the equivalent of pressing enter a couple of times in a word processor to start a new idea or section. A P element has an opening and a closing tag. Let's add a couple of paragraphs. We have the first one almost ready. For the paragraph's content, I'll paste this text about aliens and pizza. I'll create another paragraph element and paste this text. There you go. Each paragraph element automatically starts on a new line, and browsers will add a margin above and below it to help separate paragraphs visually. However, in HTML, paragraphs are not only separate your text into blocks, but also help search engines and assistive technologies understand the structure of your information. So, for paragraphs, you start with the opening tag, put in your content, close it with the ending tag. Next, for the structure, we have the heading elements. Let's add the h1 heading element. For that, I'll add an opening h1 tag, and VS Code automatically adds the closing tag. For the content, I'll write "Aliens invade Earth for pizza recipe." There you have it. H1 is the most important heading, often used as the main title of your page. There are also subheadings. We use H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6 elements, where H6 is the least important subheading. These tags are used to define headings of different levels. Let me quickly add them all. Notice that the browser automatically adds some margin before and after each heading, and the font size decreases from H1 to H6. This hierarchical structure is not just for aesthetics. It's important for SEO, search engine optimization, and helps screen readers navigate your content. So, use H1 for the main title of your page. It's best practice to have only one H1 per page for SEO purposes. Use H2 to H6 for subheadings. You can use H2 to H6 many times per page. Lastly, we have the HR tag, which stands for horizontal rule, or so-called thematic break. It's a self-closing tag. You might use it to separate different topics within a page. Visually, it creates a horizontal line on the web page. It's a way of saying we're moving on to something else. When you put the HR element, it means that you end one topic and you start a new, possibly related or contrasting topic. The HR element is useful for breaking up sections of text and creating clear divisions within your content. Alright, let's discuss inline and block level elements in HTML. They help you to structure your content for both readability and layout. Inline elements are like words in a sentence. They sit on the same line as their neighbors unless there's not enough space. For instance, the strong and the A elements are inline. This means you can make the text bold or turn it into a clickable link without starting a new line. Let me add a few strong tags to show you that. Notice that planet, square, and round pizzas remain on the same line. On the other hand, block level elements are like paragraphs. They start on a new line and stretch out as wide as they can. Our paragraph elements, headings, and HR elements are all block level elements. Now, why does this matter? Because it helps you structure your web page better. Inline elements let you style part of a text, like making a word bold within a sentence. Block level elements help organize your content into sections and subsections, like titles or separate paragraphs. We're not going to learn CSS in this video, but you've probably noticed that HTML elements come with default styles. Many of our HTML elements have a different look. That's because web browsers add default styles to them. Paragraphs get margins, making them easier to read. Headings are bold and have different sizes, because they are important. Links are blue and underlined, so that you know you can click them. Default styles make content usable without CSS, but developers often use CSS to customize these styles further. Now I've moved this weird picture to the same folder as our HTML file. Let's add it to our page. If you want to use the same picture, the link is in the description. I'll remove everything except for this H1 element. To add our image, I'll start with the img tag. Then the src attribute. It tells the browser where to find the image. Since our image is in the same directory as our HTML file, we just use the file name. It's a self-closing tag. And there's our picture. Whoa, it's too wide. Let's make it smaller. I'll add the width attribute and set it to 300 pixels. Now it's better. Notice that the height decreased automatically. We could have set it with the height attribute. This is good to know, but it's better to configure width and height of your images with CSS. But that's a topic for another video. Let's add another image, but this time we'll put a link from the internet into the src attribute. To get the link, just Google anything. I'll do normal day. Switch to the images, click on the image, then click the right mouse button over the image you like and select. Then click the right mouse button over the image and select Copy Image Address. Paste the link into the src attribute. Or just use any link to the image you want. Now we have this image. I'll reduce its width to 500 pixels. There you go. Notice that both images are on the same line. That's because images are inline elements that stay on the same line if the width allows it. And if I resize my browser, it goes on the next line. We also have the alt attribute, short for alternative text. I'll put normal day in it. When the link doesn't work, you'll see this text. And screen readers use this text to describe the image to users who can't see it. Now I'm gonna make an error in the link on purpose, so it points to a non-existent location. Alright, normal day. I'm gonna fix the link. We can also have the title attribute. It works the same way as with the A tag. It's gonna be normal day, and there is our normal day tooltip. And this is it for images. I'll remove everything except the H1 element. Now let's discuss tables. Tables in HTML are like the tables you see in a spreadsheet. They let you organize your data neatly in rows and columns. To create a table, we use the table tag. It's a container for all table content. Inside our table, we need rows. We use the tr tag for table rows. Each row can have one or more cells. To create header cells, we use the th tag. It stands for table header. One th pair for one header cell. I want 3 cells for headers. The first column will be planet. The second, favorite pizza. And the third is weird topping. Great. We have the first row and its table headers. Let's add some data. We'll have another table row. Inside, we have the td tag or table data. It's for our standard cell content. The first cell is for a planet. It's gonna be Zog. The second cell is for favorite pizza, galactic pepperoni. And the weird topping is space olives. Great. Now we've got one planet in our table. Notice that the text inside table header cells is bold and centered by default. These are the default styles that our browser adds. Normally, you change the appearance of your tables with CSS, like borders, size, colors, and more, which is going to be a topic for future videos. I want to add one more planet. So, tr for new table row. It's important to match the number of cells in every row to keep your table organized. If our first row has 3 header cells, each row after that should have 3 data cells to keep everything aligned. The first cell now is blips. The second cell is cheesy meteor showers and moon mushrooms. And there you go, blips is in our table. This is how you create tables with HTML. You start with the table tag to create your table. Add rows with tr and fill those rows with header cells th and data cells td. Now let's add huge gaps to our heading and many line breaks like this. When I refresh the page, you can see that the browser removed all the extra spaces and new lines. Multiple spaces, new lines, and tabs become one single space. It's like HTML is on a strict diet. This means if you try to format your HTML with extra spaces or line breaks for readability, the browser will simply ignore it. Why? Well, HTML is designed to display content in the most efficient way possible. The browser strips out unnecessary whitespace to keep things tidy and readable for your users. But what if we actually wanted to show all these spaces and line breaks? We've got two tools for that: HTML entities and the pre-tag. HTML entities are special codes that help us to add different interesting symbols to our web page. For a space that the browser won't ignore or remove, we write ampersand and BSP semicolon, which stands for non-breaking space. This is an HTML entity for a space that the browser will always recognize. One entity creates one space. So if we want like 5 consecutive spaces that browser won't strip away, I'll add 5 non-breaking space entities. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. One initial regular space and 5 more created by the HTML entities. So the syntax for an HTML entity is ampersand and then the entity name followed by a semicolon. There are many HTML entities you can have fun with. Just Google HTML entity list and use any of those websites. Let's remove all the extra new lines and add an H2 element that has a few entities from a playing card suit. There you go. Some characters are reserved in HTML. They have a specific function, like less than or greater than symbols, which we use to create tags. To display these characters as part of your content, we also use HTML entities. For example, if we want this opening H2 tag and closing H2 tag to appear as is in the browser, I need to use HTML entities instead of the less than or greater than symbols. Let me first replace this with plain content. This way it's going to be easier for us to read. Then I'll change less than to ampersand LT, less than, semicolon, and greater than to ampersand GT, greater than, semicolon. I'll do the same for the closing header tag. Now we can see those symbols in the browser and it's just plain text. I'll remove everything again except for the H1 element. Let's say we want to show text or code exactly as we type it, with all its spaces and line breaks. It would be very cumbersome to achieve that with HTML entities. That's where the pre-tag helps. Pre stands for pre-formatted text. I'll put back our little story as the content and a couple of new lines so that we had more formatting. Whatever you put inside a pre-tag will appear exactly as you type it, including all spaces and line breaks. It's like saying, keep this text the way I wrote it, please. Here, the pre-tag ensures that the text keeps its formatting and all the extra spaces and new lines remain visible. It's a handy tag for when you need to display code snippets or formatted text. Let's have some rest from aliens and pizzas, so I'll remove all the content. Now let's talk about lists. There are 2 main types, unordered and ordered lists. First up, unordered lists. Unordered lists use bullet points to list items. We use them when the order doesn't matter. Let's create a list for the Apocalypse Survival Kit. We start our list with the UL tag, which is short for, well, unordered list. It's a container for all the list items. We create each item in the list with the LI tag, which stands for list item. I'm gonna quickly fill up our list. There you go, an unordered list. Now for the things where order is important, we use an ordered list. We create it with the OL tag. It works just like an ordered list, but each item is automatically numbered by the browser. Let's create an ordered list on how to become a pirate. For the list items, we use the same LI tag. I'm gonna quickly fill up our list. This seems to be right. Both type of lists can be nested inside each other to create sublists. This is super handy for organizing information that falls under different categories. For instance, let me quickly create a nested list for birthday present ideas. There you go. Lists are not just for text. You can also have images, links, and other HTML elements as list items. And there you have it, lists in HTML. Let's discuss forms. Forms on the web are like, for example, the forms you fill out to order a pizza. They ask for information, you give it to them, and then they do something with that information. Let's actually create a simple login form. First up is the form tag. It's a container for all the inputs and buttons. In the opening form tag, we add the action attribute. The action attribute tells the browser where to send the form data when the user submits the form. I'll paste this URL here. It points to a little PHP script I've prepared on my website. It's going to be the so-called backend that processes the form data we submit. This script will just simply show us the data we submitted. PHP is awesome. I'll cover PHP in future videos. You can use this URL in your forms to see the data you've submitted. This way, you don't need to go through all the hassle of installing and configuring a web server and PHP on your computer. Next, I'll set the method attribute. We need the method attribute to configure how to send the data to the server. Usually it's either get or post. With get, your answers are sent through the URL. With post, they are sent behind the scenes, which is more secure. I'll use post. And I recommend you always use post. It's a secure way to send data to the web server. If you don't add the method attribute, the browser will use the get method by default, which we don't want. Now let's add some fields to our form. For that, we use the input tag. Inputs are like blank fields on a form. The input tag is super versatile. We can have text fields, password fields, checkboxes, radio buttons, and more. To configure that, I'll use the type attribute. The type tells the browser what kind of information you're expecting. This field will be for the user's name, so text. Then we need to add the name attribute. The name attribute is for the server to recognize the data from this input. We can use whatever name we want. A good practice is to use a name that reflects what kind of information we expect from this input. In our case, it's the user's name. So I'll write user name. This is the camel case naming convention, where the first word is all lowercase and the following words start with a capital letter. Input is a self-closing tag, so I can just leave it like this. At this point, if I refresh the page, we have just an empty input box where I can type in something, like pizza guy. I can add the placeholder attribute to show some text when the input is empty. Let's put something like type in your login. Now it's better. And when I start typing something, the placeholder is gone. We can also set a default value for this input with the value attribute. I'll set pizza guy here. Now we have some initial value that the user can change. If I remove this value, we have our placeholder text here. Now let's add a password field. I'll add another input tag. This time the type will be password. The name attribute will be user password, camel case. Again, it's for the server to recognize the data from this input. I won't add the value attribute, so by default it's gonna have an empty value. The placeholder will be type in your password. Now we have one more field, and if I type in something, it's all hidden. Notice that both fields are on the same line. It's because inputs are inline elements. Well, they are actually inline block elements, but we'll discuss that more in a separate video for CSS. Let's add labels to our inputs. To create a label, we use the label tag and write the actual label in it. For email, I'll simply write user name : For password, it's gonna be password : Now it's more clear what to put inside those fields. Notice that everything stays on the same line. It's because labels by default are inline elements too. I want our labels to be on separate lines. For that, we could use the br tag after the text input, like this. Now it's on the next line. Or we could use paragraphs, which are block level elements and they start on the new line. Let's use them. I'll remove br and I'll put our label input pairs inside paragraphs, like this. There you go. Notice that we have extra margin now because paragraphs have those margins by default. Now, if I remove these label tags, I'll still have the same text on the page. So why do we need to have label tags at all? That's because labels give us a cool feature. We can link a label to an input. For that, we'll use a couple of new attributes. Inside this label, I'll use the for attribute, which is gonna be login user name, in camel case again. The second attribute we need is the ID attribute. In the input, we're linking our label to. We put the same value here as in the for attribute. Now, this label and this input are linked. One caveat. Make sure that this ID value is unique on this page. That is, no other element has the same ID. Otherwise, it won't work. Let's do the same for the password. I need to make sure that both the for attribute and the ID attribute have unique value. It's going to be login user password. The same for the ID here. Now, if I refresh the page, it seems that nothing has changed visually. But now if I click on the label, it focuses on this input, which means they are linked. The same for the password field. Labels make your forms easier to use, especially on mobile, and for people using screen readers. Also, this feature is very convenient with checkboxes and radio buttons, which we'll discuss in a minute. This is all great. We have our input fields, but how do we submit this form? We need a button to click. Let's add that. I want this button to be inside a paragraph too, just for visuals. To create the actual button, I can use, surprisingly, the input tag again, but the type will now be submit. And to set the text of this button, we use the value attribute. I'll write just log in. The submit button doesn't need to have a name, because it's not like it has any data to send to the server. It's just a button. When we click it, it packages up all the form data and sends it off to the server based on the form's action and method. Let's do that. For username, I'll type in pizza76. For password, it's gonna be cheese. Submit. And there's our data. It's key value pairs, where the key is the input name and the value is the actual data that we typed into this input. There is our pizza76 for username and cheese for password. Let me go back and quickly type in different values. Now it's _soda_ for username and 3 a.m. in the morning for password. Submit. And there they are, our input values. And that's the basics of HTML forms. You start your form with the form tag, you put all the inputs inside. You add labels with the label tag. Let's make our form about pizzas. I'll remove our login form inputs except for the submit, where I'll change the value to just order this pizza. Let's discuss checkboxes. To add a checkbox to our form, I'll use the input tag with the type attribute set to checkbox. Next goes the name attribute, which is useful when you're sending data to the server. I'll put toppings. Then goes the value. I'll put cheese. This value will be sent to the server when this checkbox is checked and the form is submitted. There you go. It's not pretty, but still a checkbox. I can select it and submit it. There is our topping cheese. This value only goes to the server when the checkbox is selected. Let me show you that. If I don't select the checkbox, the server will not receive the value when the form is submitted. At this stage, it's almost impossible for users to figure out what this checkbox is about. We need a label here. You already know how to add labels to inputs and link them together. I'll write label for, the value is going to be topping cheese, and I'll add ID to the input, which will be topping cheese too. The ID must be unique for each element on the page. Don't forget to add the actual label, cheese. Now it's clear. Clicking on the label will also toggle the checkbox. This is nice for usability. But don't forget to link your label with the input using the same value for the for and ID attributes. Otherwise, it won't work. Checkboxes are great when you want to give users multiple options and allow them to select more than one. It's like having a list of toppings for a pizza where you can pick just what you like. You might want mushrooms, pepperoni, or olives. Now let's add a few more to make a list of toppings. Each one will be on a separate line, so I'll start with the P tag. The label tag, this topping will be mushrooms, so I'll add 4 topping mushrooms. Then the actual label is mushrooms. Now the input, type checkbox, name toppings, the value this time mushrooms. And the ID value will be the same as before. I'll quickly repeat the same for the pepperoni and olive toppings. There you go. But now, if I select 2 or more toppings and submit the form, the server receives only the last checkbox value. That's because of the way we specified the name of our checkboxes. When we have only one checkbox, this works. But with multiple checkboxes that share the same name, we need to add square brackets, like this, for it to work properly. Think of it as telling the server all these checkboxes are related and part of the same group named toppings. So all the checkboxes in the group must share the same name with the square brackets. Now, if I select all those checkboxes and submit the form, we have all the values on the server. Let's say that the cheese topping is popular and we want it to be already pre-selected when someone visits our page. For that, we have the checked attribute. I'm gonna just add the checked attribute like this. It's like saying, yes, cheese is a great choice, so let's include it from the start. The checked attribute doesn't need a value. Its presence alone does the work. Now, this checkbox is always checked by default. And this is how you add checkboxes to your forms. Let's move on to radio buttons. Radio buttons are great when you want the user to choose just one option from a few choices, like their favorite pizza size. You can't have both small and medium size for one pizza. Let's add the ability to choose pizza size to our form. So I'll add the P element because I want all the options to be on separate lines. I'll write input, type, and I'm going to use radio because we want a radio button here. Then the name attribute will be pizza size, camel case. This button is for a small pizza, so the value will be small. I'm planning to have a label for this radio button, so I'll add ID. Its value will be pizza size small. Next, I'll add label for pizza size small. Small is for the content. Let's also add the HR element here to separate sizes from toppings. Here is our radio button. I can select it. The label is to the right because we put the label element after the input in our code. Now let's add options for medium and large pizzas. Each radio button is its own input tag. So I'll add P and then input type radio. For the name attribute, we give all the pizza size radio buttons the same name, pizza size. This is crucial. It tells the browser these radio buttons are grouped together. Only one can be selected at a time within this group. The value attribute specifies the value sent to the server if this option is selected. For medium size, it's medium. The ID attribute is going to be pizza size medium. I'll add the label the same way here. For will be pizza size medium. The content is medium. This is great. Now, if I select one radio button, the other one is deselected. And if I select the medium size pizza size and a couple of toppings and submit this form, the server receives all of that. Now I'll quickly add a radio button for the large pizza size. So P tag again, input, radio, the name is still pizza size, the value will be large, and the ID is going to be pizza size large. Remember, we want the ID attribute to be unique. And don't forget the closing greater than symbol and the label. There you go. All the sizes are available now. If we want a radio button to be pre-selected, we can add the checked attribute to it. It's the same as with checkboxes. The only difference is that only one radio button in a group can be checked by default. This means I can add the checked attribute to only one of the inputs that has the pizza size name, the medium size radio pre-selected. And that's it. This is how you add radio buttons to your forms. Remember, radio buttons are like single choice questions. Use the same name attribute for all buttons in the group and set a unique value for each option. Now let's talk about creating a drop-down list in HTML. Let's add one to our form. We use select and option tags for this. Our drop-down is going to be for choosing your pizza sauce. We'll start with the select tag. It's the container that holds all the sauce options. This is where we put the name attribute for this dropdown. The name attribute is what gets sent to the server when you submit the form. I'll put sauce. Inside, we add option tags for each choice. To add the tomato sauce option, I'll write option, then the value attribute. Each option has a value, which is what gets sent to the server when you pick that option. I'll write tomato. Then the text between the opening and closing option tags is what you see in the drop-down list. It's going to be tomato. Now let's add more sauces. For each sauce, we add an option element. I'll add barbecue and pesto. There you go. Now we can select the sauce we want for our pizza. I'll choose barbecue. And there it is, our barbecue medium-sized pizza with cheese. Let's also add a label that's going to be sauce, capital S. Don't forget to make sure that the for attribute is the same as the ID. Otherwise, they won't be linked. Let's also add a horizontal rule to separate it visually even more. This is better. Notice that when this page loads, we have the tomato option selected by default. But what if I want the barbecue sauce to be selected by default? Because why not? It's a great sauce. For that, we can use the selected attribute. It's kind of like the checked attribute, but for the option tag. So I'll add the selected attribute to the barbecue option. Great. The barbecue option is selected by default when this page loads. And that's it. Now you know how to add drop-down lists to your page. Next, we'll look at HTML comments. You create a comment with less than, exclamation mark, dash dash to start, and dash dash greater than to end. Everything you type in between these markers, browser ignores and won't display. Let's write here pizza ordering form, all caps, for us to easily recognize what this form is about. Comments can also span multiple lines. Let's start a comment here and end it here. This way, our pizza size options won't appear on the page. There you go, our pizza size radio buttons are gone. HTML comments don't appear on the web page, but are visible in the page source code. So avoid leaving sensitive information there. To view the source code in Chrome, click View, Developer, View Source Code. And there they are, our comments. Comments are useful when you want to leave notes for yourself and other developers about what your code does. They are also useful when you're testing out different bits of code and want to temporarily turn off a piece without deleting it. You wrap it in a comment, and it's like it's not even there. That's what we did with the pizza size code. I'll remove our pizza form code. Now, let's discuss iframes. I'll start with the iframe tag. Think of an iframe as a window on your web page that displays another web page inside it. The iframe tag stands for inline frame. This can be super useful for embedding things like maps, videos, or even other web pages directly into your website. This is, for example, how you add YouTube videos to your website. Let's add one. Next goes the src attribute. src stands for source, which is the URL of the video we want to embed. Just like pointing someone to where they can watch the video, src points your iframe to the content it should display. It's where we put a link to the YouTube video we want to show. Let's put the link to the Baldur's Gate 3 video. Great, and it's already clickable. And if I click, the video starts to play. I can mute, rewind, pause, and do some other simple actions. But there are several things to improve here. Our iframe is quite small, there is this ugly border around it, and I can't open the video full screen. Let's fix that. To remove the border, we use the frame border attribute and I'll set it to 0. So the border size is 0. And the ugly border is gone. To increase the width of the iframe, I'll use the width attribute, pretty much like we did with images. What about 560 pixels? I can set the height too. That'll be 315 pixels. And the iframe is bigger now. To allow full screen, we use the allow full screen attribute. It doesn't have a value, just having it like this will do the trick. And now, if I play the video, we should be able to watch it in full screen. And that's it for iframes. They're easy to use and very powerful. But remember to use them sparingly. Not everything needs to be embedded. Too many iframes can slow down your page. Alright, you've made it to the end of this HTML crash course. Way to go! Now you can create your very own web pages using HTML. You know how to make those pages more interactive and functional with links and forms. You can add images to your web pages, use tables and lists, embed other web pages, videos, and even maps. All this will be helpful for you to build your personal projects and add them to your portfolio. Now you're one step closer to becoming a software developer. However, HTML is just the beginning. It's how you create the body of your website. But to turn it into a full-fledged web application, there is more to learn. CSS will be your next step. It's how you make your website look good. So I'm working now on the CSS course that covers the essentials. I plan to release it in 3 weeks. If you enjoyed this course and you want to learn CSS, subscribe to this channel and you'll see the course as soon as it's published. I'm a self-taught developer. I get it that it's hard at the beginning and it takes a lot of time to learn. However, I think that software development is amazing and totally worth it. I've been through this difficult beginner stage, and in this channel, I want to use what I've learned to help you get started faster. So by subscribing, you'll also help me make more useful content for you. Thank you, and see you next time.